My alarm went off at 5:10 a.m., the same way it always did on weekdays. I shut it off before it buzzed twice. I've never needed the reminder. When your life runs on schedules, you wake up before the noise starts. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before sunrise. I lay there for a second listening to the hum of the air vent and the steady breathing coming from Noah's room down the hall. I moved through the morning the way I always did. Shower, coffee, uniform already pressed from the night before. Lunch packed without thinking too hard about it. I didn't rush. Rushing creates mistakes, and mistakes follow you all day. That's true in the Navy, and it's true at home. By the time the kitchen light came on, Noah was already at the table with his notebook open. He was lining up his pencils like he had a system only he understood. 10 years old and already allergic to last-minute anything. "You're up early," I said. He shrugged without looking up. I wanted to finish this. That was Noah. Some people called kids like him anxious. I called it learned behavior. When one parent has a job that doesn't bend you, learn to plan. I poured him a glass of milk and set a banana next to his notebook. He ate without being told. Another habit neither of us remembered teaching him. "Are you leaving today?" he asked. The question wasn't dramatic, no tone, just a check-in. "Yes," I said. "I'll be back tonight." He nodded and went back to writing. I didn't explain where I was going or what I'd be doing. I never did. He knew I was in the Navy. He knew I wore a uniform and went to meetings that ran long. That was enough. We left the apartment at 6:15. I walked him to the bus stop, even though he said he didn't need me to anymore. I watched him climb the steps, turn around, and give me a quick wave. Then the bus pulled away, and the day shifted gears. The drive to base was routine. Same roads, same coffee cooling in the cup holder, same mental checklist running quietly in the background. I'd learned a long time ago how to keep work and home separate, even when both demanded your full attention. You don't last long in my line of work if you let everything bleed together. At the office, no one cared that I was a single mom. They cared that contracts were clean, timelines were realistic, and nothing slipped through the cracks. I liked that. No guessing, no fake concern. Just expectations and accountability. By mid-morning, my inbox was already full. An internal review was coming up, and that meant double-checking everything I'd signed off on over the last quarter. Not exciting, but important. The kind of work no one notices unless it goes wrong. Around lunch, my phone buzzed. One missed call. My sister. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I already knew what it would be about. When I finally checked it, I was right. "Hey, Melissa," said her voice bright in that careful way she used when she wanted something. "We're doing dinner this Sunday. Mom really wants everyone there. I thought it'd be good for Noah. Family time and all that." Family time. That phrase always sounded like a suggestion and a judgment at the same time. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "We'll be there." I didn't add anything else. Sunday came fast. It always did. Noah spent the afternoon reading while I folded laundry and checked my watch more than I needed to. I dressed carefully. Nothing that screamed military. Nothing that looked like I was trying too hard. Just jeans, a sweater, and the quiet hope that it would be uneventful. The drive to my parents' house took 40 minutes. Noah watched the road counting something in his head. When we pulled into the driveway, Melissa's SUV was already there. "Your aunt's here," Noah said. "I see that." Inside the house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. My mother hugged Noah first, then me. My father nodded from the living room without looking away from the TV. Melissa appeared from the kitchen with a smile that had been practiced. "There you are," she said. "We were starting to wonder if you'd make it." I checked the time. "We're early." She laughed like it was a joke and looked past me at Noah. "You've gotten so tall," she said, then glanced at his shoes. "Do you still have gym on Fridays?" "Yes," Noah said. "Good," she replied. "Routine matters." I watched Noah's shoulders stiffen just slightly. Most people wouldn't notice it. I did. Dinner was set quickly, plates passed, small talk filled the space. Melissa talked about her kids' schedules, their activities, how busy everything was. She talked about it like a badge. My mother listened. My father asked questions. No one asked about my week. Halfway through, Halfway through the meal, Melissa leaned back and smiled at Noah. "So she said, how's school?" "It's fine," he answered. "That's good," she said. "Kids really need consistency." My fork paused for half a second before I set it down. The room didn't change. No one raised their voice. No one reacted. But something shifted, subtle and unmistakable. Melissa didn't wait for a response. She rarely did. It just makes such a difference when things are stable. 2 parents, predictable schedules. You know, I kept my voice even. "He's doing fine." "Of course he is," she said quickly. "I'm just saying, not everyone can handle a life that's always on call. Not every marriage survives that." Noah stared at his plate. That moment right there, the way a comment slips in like it belongs, that's when I realized something important. If this sounds familiar to you, drop a comment and tell me what people say when they think they're being helpful. And if you want more real family drama stories like this, you can subscribe. No pressure, just saying. Melissa took a sip of her water and smiled again. I mean, some women choose the Navy. Others choose their families. I didn't respond. I focused on Noah's breathing, slow, steady. The way I taught him without ever saying it out loud. "Are you still on that unpredictable schedule?" she asked me like she was asking about the weather. "It works for us," I said. She nodded. "I guess it has to." Noah's fork hovered over his plate. He hadn't taken a bite in a while. I noticed. I always did. My mother changed the subject. My father cleared his throat. The conversation moved on, but the words didn't disappear. They never do. They settle. They wait. And as I sat there listening, watching my son go quieter by the minute, something I'd been ignoring for a long time finally started to feel a lot heavier than it should have. I noticed Noah's fork stop moving before anyone else did. It hovered over his plate like he was waiting for permission to finish eating, or maybe waiting for something to pass. I didn't say anything. I just reached for my water and took a slow sip the way I do when I need a second to decide whether something deserves a response. Melissa kept talking. She always did. Silence made her uncomfortable unless she was the one controlling it. "I just mean," she said, leaning back in her chair, "kids need balance, structure. That's not a criticism. It's just reality." Reality. That was one of her favorite words. She used it like a shield. My mother nodded along, not fully agreeing, not fully disagreeing either. My father focused on cutting his chicken into neat pieces. No one contradicted her. No one ever did. Noah's shoulders were tight, not dramatic, just enough that I could see it out of the corner of my eye. He stared at his plate like the food had suddenly become complicated. "He's doing well," I said, keeping my voice flat. "His teachers don't have concerns." Melissa smiled at me, that same polite smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm sure they don't. You're very organized. You've always been like that." There it was, the compliment that wasn't won. She turned her attention back to Noah. "Do you like school?" "Yes," he said. "That's good," she replied. Some kids struggle when things are inconsistent. Noah didn't answer. He took a small bite and chewed slowly. I watched him swallow. I watched the way he sat straighter when adults spoke, like he was bracing for something he didn't quite understand, but had learned to expect. Melissa reached for her wine glass. "I don't know how you do it," she said to me. "Between the Navy and everything else. It takes a special kind of person." I waited. I'd learned that when Melissa framed something as admiration, the other half was coming. "Not everyone's built for that kind of marriage," she added. "Some people need their partner around more. Emotionally, I mean." My mother shifted in her seat. "Melissa, I'm not blaming anyone," Melissa said quickly. "I'm just saying it's hard. Especially for kids. They notice things." Noah's fork clinked softly against his plate. He froze like the sound had surprised him. I set my napkin down carefully. "He's not confused," I said. "He knows what our life looks like." Melissa tilted her head. "Kids don't always say what they feel." I met her gaze. Neither do adults. That earned me a small laugh from my father. But it didn't change anything. Melissa smiled and took a sip of wine, like she'd made her point, and moved on. Dinner continued. The conversation drifted to vacations, school fundraisers, things that felt safe. Melissa talked about how busy her kids were, how full their schedules were. My mother listened. My father asked about sports. Noah ate slowly, methodically, like he was counting bites. I caught him lining up his peas again. Perfect little rows. I knew that habit. It showed up when he was trying to stay calm. When dessert came out, Noah shook his head. I'm full. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Already? He nodded. Yes. She smiled again. Sensitive like his mom, she said lightly, like it was a joke everyone was supposed to laugh at. No one did. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not yet. More like the quiet realization that this wasn't accidental, that it hadn't been for a long time. We didn't stay much longer after that. I thanked my mother, said goodnight to my father, and told Melissa we'd talk soon. She hugged Noah and whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded politely. On the drive home, the radio stayed off. The road was dark, familiar. Noah watched the streetlights pass, counting again. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said. Too fast. I didn't push. Pushing only made him shut down. When we got home, he went straight to his room. I heard his backpack hit the floor. Then the quiet click of his desk lamp. I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, staring at the counter like it might tell me something useful. Later, when I checked on him, he was sitting on his bed with a notebook, open pencil resting in his hand. Not writing, just holding it. You want help? I asked. He shook his head. I'm done. I sat beside him anyway. We didn't talk at first. I didn't rush it. Mom, he said finally. Yeah. Is Aunt Melissa mad at you? The question caught me off guard. Why would she be? He shrugged. She talks like that. Like what? He looked down at this notebook. Like something's wrong. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes people confuse opinions with facts. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Did I do something? He asked. No. Did Dad leave because of me? That one landed hard. I didn't hide it. I didn't panic either. No, I said. Your dad left because adult relationships are complicated, not because of you. Not ever. He nodded slowly. Okay. But he didn't look relieved, just quiet. After he went to sleep, I stood in the hallway and watched him for a minute. He slept on his side knees, tucked slightly, one hand curled near his face. He looked younger when he slept, less careful. I went back to the kitchen and opened my laptop. Not for work, for the school portal. I skimmed messages from his teacher attendance notes, upcoming assignments. One message stood out. Nothing dramatic. Just a line about Noah hesitating to raise his hand in class lately. Second-guessing answers he used to give confidently. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. This wasn't about one dinner, or one comment. It was a pattern. Small remarks stacking up, each one light enough to ignore on its own, heavy enough together to change how a kid saw himself. I thought about how often I'd told myself it wasn't worth addressing. That staying calm was better than making things awkward. That family harmony mattered. I also thought about how precise I was at work. How I corrected small errors before they became bigger ones. How I never ignored patterns just because they were inconvenient. The next morning, Noah ate his breakfast without lining up his food. That caught my attention more than it should have. He moved slower, quieter. Bus coming early today? I asked. He shook his head. No. We walked out together at 6:15 like always. At the bus stop, he climbed the steps, turned around and waved. Same routine, same timing. But he didn't smile. I stood there a moment longer than usual after the bus pulled away, hands in my pockets, watching the empty street. I didn't feel angry. I felt alert, like something had shifted from background noise to something I couldn't ignore anymore. By the time I got in the car, I already knew one thing for sure. Whatever I had been calling keeping the peace was starting to look a lot like teaching my son to absorb things that weren't his to carry. I kept my hands on the steering wheel longer than necessary before pulling out of the bus stop. The street was empty, quiet in that early morning way that usually helps me reset. That day, it didn't. My mind stayed on the way Noah hadn't smiled when he waved. At work, the day filled itself the way it always did. Meetings stacked. Emails flagged. A reminder about the upcoming audit popped up before I'd even finished my coffee. I focused on what was in front of me because that's what I'm good at. I've never been the type to spiral. I deal with what's measurable. Still, small things followed me around. I found myself rereading messages before sending them. double-checking numbers I knew were right. That usually means something's off, even if you can't put your finger on it yet. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Noah's teacher. Nothing urgent. That was what the subject line said. She wrote that Noah was doing fine academically. No issues with assignments. No behavior problems. Then came the part she probably debated including. She'd noticed Noah hesitating more in class, raising his hand, then putting it down, looking around before answering questions he already knew. She asked if everything was okay at home. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back that we'd talk soon. I didn't add anything else. I wasn't ready to frame it yet. When I got home that evening, Noah was already there. His shoes were lined up by the door backpack, hanging on the hook instead of tossed on the floor. Another small thing. He'd always been neat, but this was careful. How was school, I asked. Fine. What'd you do? Math. Reading. That's it. He shrugged, I guess. We made dinner together. Pasta, nothing complicated. He stirred the sauce while I drained the pot. We'd done it 100 times. He liked knowing what came next. Halfway through eating, he asked, "Do you think people notice when families are different?" I didn't answer right away. I took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Sometimes. Do they think it's bad? Some do, I said. Some don't. He nodded like he was filing that away. Okay. After dinner, he went to his room to work on homework. I stayed in the kitchen and cleaned up slower than usual. I wiped the counter twice. Didn't need to. Just needed something to do. Later, when I checked on him, his desk was neat, notebook open. He was writing carefully, erasing more than he usually did. You don't have to make it perfect, I said. I know. Then why erase it? He looked at the page. I don't want it to sound wrong. Wrong how? He shrugged. Like complaining? I let that sit. Writing about your life isn't complaining. He nodded, but his pencil stayed still. That night, after he went to bed, I took the trash out. On top of the bag was a folded piece of paper. Not torn, just folded once like he'd thought about it and changed his mind. I unfolded it on the counter. It was a short paragraph. A school assignment, probably. Describe your family. I live with my mom. My dad doesn't live with us anymore. My mom works a lot. I try not to bother her. I think she gets tired. That was it. No anger, no drama. Just facts the way a kid understands them. I stood there longer than I should have. Reading it again didn't change anything. It just made it heavier. The next few days moved fast. School, work, meals, homework. Nothing outwardly wrong, but once I started paying attention, the changes were everywhere. Noah started asking if I was proud of him for things I'd always assumed he knew the answer to. Taking out the trash, finishing homework early, setting the table without being asked. One afternoon, I found him stacking the mail into neat piles, even the junk. You don't have to do that, I said. I know, he replied. I just thought it'd help. Help with what? He hesitated. Stuff. That night, while I was washing dishes, he stood in the doorway and watched me. Not in the usual way. Like he was waiting for the right moment. Mom, yeah. Do you think Dad would have stayed if you didn't have your job? I turned the faucet off. The kitchen went quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. No, I said. I don't. Are you sure? Yes. He looked down at the floor. Aunt Melissa said some jobs make family hard. I took a breath. Slow, controlled. Some jobs are hard, I said. That doesn't mean they ruin families. He nodded. She said kids can feel it. What did you feel? I asked. He thought about it. Like I should be better. That was when it clicked. Not all at once. More like a slow, uncomfortable alignment of pieces I'd been pretending weren't connected. This wasn't about divorce, or the Navy, or even Melissa, not really. It was about what happens when a kid hears the same message enough times and starts translating it into something personal. I sat down across from him. You don't need to earn your place here, I said. You already have it. He nodded, but his eyes stayed cautious. At work the next day, I caught myself thinking about patterns again. The way small errors compound. The way ignoring early signs always costs more later. That afternoon, I got a notification from my bank. Nothing alarming, just an automatic transfer confirmation, one I'd seen before. I opened it, checked the details, and felt a familiar tightness in my chest. I hadn't connected this to anything else before. It lived in a separate box in my head, something I handled quietly and moved on from. Standing there in my office phone in hand, I realized how many boxes I'd been maintaining. Work, family, extended family, finances. Each one managed separately, like they couldn't possibly affect each other. I closed the notification and locked my screen. That evening, Noah asked if we had to go to Grandma's again soon. Why I asked? He shrugged. Just asking? I looked at him, really looked. The way he waited for my answer, the way he braced for it. We'll see, I said. He nodded, not relieved, just accepting. Later, as I packed his lunch for the next day, I caught myself moving slower, more deliberate. Not because I was tired, because I was thinking. There's a difference between being patient and being passive. I'd always told myself I was choosing the first one. Lately, it was starting to feel like the second. By the time I turned the kitchen light off, I wasn't angry. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. I just knew that whatever I'd been doing wasn't neutral anymore. It was teaching something, and that wasn't a lesson I was willing to keep passing on. I didn't throw the paper away. I slid it into the folder on the counter and left it there face down, like I didn't need to look at it again to know what it said. The house settled into its usual evening sounds, pipes ticking, a neighbor's TV through the wall, Noah brushing his teeth with the door half open the way he always did. The divorce hadn't been loud. That was the part everyone seemed to forget. No screaming matches, no slammed doors, no dramatic exits. Just a slow accumulation of conversations that ended the same way, with both of us realizing we were tired of explaining ourselves. We'd tried schedules. We'd tried calendars on the fridge. We'd tried promising to be more flexible, then failing at it. He didn't hate my job. He hated how it rearranged everything without asking. I didn't hate him. I hated feeling like every decision came with an apology. When we signed the papers, we agreed on one thing quickly. Noah came first. We didn't argue about that. We argued about almost everything else. To my family, though, the story simplified itself. Andrea chose the Navy. The Navy cost her marriage. End of discussion. Melissa loved that version. It fit neatly into her worldview. Careers were fine as long as they didn't inconvenience anyone else. The next family gathering was a birthday dinner for my father. Same house, same table, different menu. Melissa arrived early as usual, already mid-conversation when we walked in. There she is, she said, smiling at me. Fresh off another long week. I hung my jacket up and nodded, something like that. She glanced at Noah. Your mom's always busy, huh? He shrugged. She works. Melissa laughed lightly. I know, I just mean some jobs don't let go. Dinner started smoothly enough. Stories about work, complaints about traffic. My mother asked Noah about school. My father talked about a neighbor's new truck. Then Melissa leaned back and said, You know, I was talking to someone at work the other day. Her sister's in the military, too. Marriage didn't last. No one asked her to continue. She did anyway. It's hard to compete with that kind of commitment, she added. Some people don't realize it until it's too late. I kept my eyes on my plate. I'd learned that responding too quickly gave her exactly what she wanted. My mother cleared her throat. Every marriage is different. Of course, Melissa said. I just think kids need to see stability, consistency. 2 parents showing up. Noah shifted in his seat. Not enough to draw attention. Enough for me to notice. He sees that, I said. Just not in the way you're describing. Melissa smiled at me, patient, almost pitying. I'm not judging. I just think priorities matter. I took a breath. They do. She nodded. Exactly. That was the problem. She thought we were agreeing. Later, while plates were being cleared, she added, I mean, some women don't know when to put family first. The table went quiet for a beat, not uncomfortable, just thin. My father laughed awkwardly. All right, let's not turn this into a debate. Melissa held her hands up. I'm just being honest. Honest. Another word she liked to hide behind. On the drive home, Noah didn't say anything. He stared out the window, fingers tracing patterns on the glass. She was talking about you, he said finally. I know. Did you do something wrong? No. Then why does she talk like that? I kept my voice steady. Because it makes her feel right. He nodded, but his jaw stayed tight. At home, he went straight to his room. I heard him close the door more carefully than usual. The next week, my schedule shifted. An internal review meant longer days, earlier mornings. I told Noah ahead of time. Wrote it on the calendar, left notes. He adjusted without complaint. That part never worried me. What worried me was how often he checked the calendar, like he was confirming something. One evening, as I was sorting mail, he hovered near the counter. Mom, yeah. Do you think Aunt Melissa thinks I'm messed up? The word hit harder than it should have. Why would she think that? He shrugged. She says stuff. I set the mail down. What stuff? About families, about dads. I nodded. She doesn't get to decide that. He looked at me. Then why does she say it? I didn't have a clean answer, not one that fit into a sentence. The following Sunday, my mother called. Casual, cheerful. Asked if we were coming by later. Melissa would be there. I looked at Noah, sitting at the table homework, spread out neatly. He wasn't listening, but he was always aware. Sure, I said. We'll stop by. When we arrived, Melissa greeted us like nothing had happened. That was her skill. Resetting the tone without resetting the behavior. During dinner, she waited longer this time. Let the conversation breathe. Then, as my mother was talking about an upcoming holiday, Melissa said, Do you think you'll be able to take time off for that? I'll see, I said. She smiled. That's always the answer, isn't it? I didn't respond. She turned to Noah. Does it bother you when your mom's gone a lot? He froze, just for a second. No, he said quietly. That's good, she replied. Some kids don't handle it well, especially after divorce. My fork stopped midair. My father looked up. Melissa, what she asked. I'm asking a question. He's right here, my mother said. So am I, Melissa replied. Kids should be able to talk about things. I set my fork down, slowly, deliberately. He doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Melissa tilted her head. I'm just concerned. There it was again, that word. I know I said, you've made that clear. The room shifted, not enough to stop her, enough to register. She laughed softly. You're defensive. I'm attentive, I replied. She rolled her eyes. You always do this. You act like any comment is an attack. I met her gaze. You talk about my divorce like it's a punchline. She scoffed. Oh, come on. Not everything is a joke, I said. Noah pushed his chair back slightly. Not leaving, just creating space. I placed my hand on the table. Not to make a point, to ground myself. Melissa leaned back. If you didn't want opinions, you shouldn't have made such unconventional choices. I looked at Noah. His eyes were fixed on the table. In that moment, something clarified. Not in a dramatic way, in a practical one. This wasn't about correcting Melissa or changing her mind. It was about understanding what my silence was allowing. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. Cold, steady. I didn't make unconventional choices, I said. I made necessary ones. She opened her mouth to respond. I didn't wait for it. I stood up and told Noah to grab his jacket. He did without hesitation. As we walked out, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt precise, the same way I do when I realize a process isn't working the way it's supposed to, and that adjusting it isn't optional anymore. I didn't turn the radio on right away. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the night air cut through the tightness in my chest. Noah sat quietly, seatbelt snug, jacket folded in his lap. When we stopped at a red light, he glanced at me, then back out the windshield. Thanks for leaving, he said. For what? For not making me answer. I nodded. You never have to perform for adults. That landed. I could tell by the way his shoulders dropped just a little. Back home, the routine took over. Shoes by the door, hands washed, leftovers warmed. Noah ate without commentary. He didn't line up his food this time. Another small shift. I noticed. I didn't point it out. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop and pulled up the work calendar for the week. An internal review meeting was scheduled first thing Monday. Not unusual. What caught my eye was the scope. Contract audits, vendor compliance, payment timelines. My lane. I've always kept my work simple when I explain it. Logistics, planning, oversight. I don't talk about consequences. I don't talk about what happens when things slip. It's not secrecy, it's discipline. You don't bring work noise home unless it belongs there. I checked my email. A flagged message from finance. Automatic but specific. Payment discrepancy resolved. Account current. I knew the account number before I finished reading. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The light hummed softly, familiar, grounding. Months ago, Melissa had called me late voice tight in a way she didn't bother hiding. Mark had been laid off. It was temporary, she said. Just a gap. But the mortgage refinance they'd done the year before was biting back. Adjustable terms. Bad timing. She didn't ask outright. She never did. She talked around it. About stress. About the kids. About how embarrassing it was to even bring it up. I told her I'd look at the paperwork. Co-signing wasn't dramatic. It was math. Credit scores. Ratios. Risk. I knew exactly what it meant. I also knew the house mattered more to the kids than to the adults who lived there. So I signed. Quietly, no announcement. No conditions spelled out because I assumed respect didn't need to be negotiated. When the first shortfall notice came, I covered it. Same with the second. Automated transfers. Clean. On time. No one called. No one asked. I didn't remind. It stayed in a separate box in my head. Family help. Not leverage, not a favor to be cashed in. Seeing the confirmation email now, after everything Melissa had said, the boxes didn't stay separate. The next morning, I moved through my routine like always. Shower, coffee, uniform. Noah ate cereal and read the back of the box like it held secrets. "Are you going to Grandma's again this week?" he asked. I paused, then said no. He looked up, okay. No follow-up, no relief, just acceptance. At work, the review started on time. We went through documents line by line. Payment histories, compliance checks. When my turn came, I explained the discrepancy and the resolution. No drama, just facts. After the meetings, my supervisor pulled me aside. "You're solid as always," he said. "But you've got a lot on your plate. Make sure you're not carrying things you don't need to." I smiled. I am. It wasn't a lie. Not yet. That afternoon, Melissa texted. A photo of her kids at soccer practice. No message, just the image. I didn't respond. Later, another message came through. "Are you mad?" I typed no and stopped there. At home, Noah was quieter than usual, but lighter somehow. He finished his homework without erasing half the page. When he got a problem wrong, he didn't freeze. He corrected it and moved on. "Can we go to the park tomorrow?" he asked. "Sure, even if you're tired." I smiled, especially then. We went. The park was mostly empty. He climbed the structure without looking back to check if I was watching. That was new. I sat on the bench and answered emails on my phone until he called out, "Did you see that?" I did. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened the folder on the counter. The one I'd slid the paper into days ago. I added the bank notices, the refinance agreement, the payment confirmations, not as a weapon, as a record. Melissa's comments replayed in my head. About priorities, about stability, about choosing family. The irony wasn't lost on me, it just wasn't funny. The following Friday, my mother called. Her tone was different, less cheerful. "Melissa's stressed," she said. "They're figuring things out." "I know," I replied. "She says you've been distant. I've been busy. She thinks you're upset." I considered correcting that. I didn't. "I'm focused," I said instead. My mother sighed. "Family helps family." "Yes," I said. "And family doesn't undermine children." There was a pause. Did she say something again? I looked at the folder on the counter. She's been saying things for years. My mother didn't argue. That told me more than a defense would have. Over the weekend, Melissa sent another message. "We should talk." I didn't reply. Sunday came. I made breakfast with Noah. Pancakes. He flipped one successfully and grinned like he'd won something. "Can I invite Ben over next week?" he asked. "Of course." He nodded. "Good." Later, while he played in his room, I sat at the table with the folder open. I didn't feel angry. I felt methodical. The way I do before a review. When you lay everything out and see how it actually works. Not how you told yourself it did. I realized something simple and uncomfortable. I'd been managing risk everywhere except where it mattered most. I closed the folder and slid it into my bag. Not because I planned to use it, because pretending it didn't exist was no longer an option. When Noah came back into the kitchen, he glanced at the bag. "Work stuff." "Some of it," I said. He nodded, satisfied. "Okay." I watched him pour himself a glass of water, careful not to spill, then carry it to the table with both hands. That was the moment I understood the pattern clearly. What he was learning, what I was modeling. and what needed to stop being absorbed quietly, like it didn't count. I zipped my bag and set it by the door without thinking too hard about it. Overthinking had never helped me make good decisions. Preparation did. The folder stayed inside flat against the side where I wouldn't forget it, but also wouldn't feel it pressing against my arm every time I moved. Noah watched me from the kitchen table while he finished his homework. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. "Yes." "Grandma's?" "Yes." He nodded once and went back to his math. No questions, no complaints. That was the part that bothered me. He'd learned how to adapt too well. I changed into clean jeans and a sweater. Nothing sharp. Nothing that suggested I was ready for a fight. I wasn't. I just wasn't interested in being careless anymore. The drive over was quiet. Noah stared out the window, counting something again. I didn't ask what. Some habits aren't problems. They're anchors. When we pulled into the driveway, Melissa's SUV was already there. My stomach tightened, not from nerves but from recognition. The pattern was already in motion. Inside the house buzzed with the low-level chaos of family dinners. Plates clinking. My mother moving between the stove and the table. My father adjusting his chair. Melissa talking already mid-story, as if we'd been there the whole time. "There you are," she said, smiling brightly. "We were just talking about schedules." Of course they were. Noah greeted his grandparents politely and took his usual seat beside me. I set my bag down against the wall near my chair, close enough to reach without making a show of it. Dinner started the way it always did. Weather, traffic, someone's coworker, someone else's vacation plans. Melissa talked about how busy her kids were, how full their calendar was. She said it like exhaustion was proof of success. I ate slowly, watched, listened. Halfway through the meal, Melissa leaned back and glanced at me. "So," she said, "how's work?" "Busy," she laughed. "Isn't it always?" "Yes." She took a sip of wine. "I don't know how you keep up with it." Honestly, some jobs don't leave room for anything else. My mother shot her a look. "Melissa?" What she asked. "I'm just curious." Noah's fork slowed. I noticed the exact moment it did. "It works for us," I said. She nodded. "You always say that." I met her eyes. "Because it's true." She smiled thinly and turned to Noah. "Does it feel like that to you?" The question landed heavier than it sounded. Noah looked at his plate. "It's fine." "That's good," Melissa said. "Kids need to feel secure, especially after divorce." My father cleared his throat. "Let's keep things light." Melissa waved him off. I'm just talking." Talking. That word again. I set my fork down. Not hard, not fast, just enough to register. "He doesn't need to answer that," I said. Melissa tilted her head. "I'm asking him how he feels." "You're asking him to evaluate his life at the dinner table," I replied. She laughed softly. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being specific." She rolled her eyes. "You always do this. You take everything as a criticism." "I take patterns seriously," I said. Noah's foot brushed against mine under the table. A small unconscious movement. I placed my hand lightly against his knee, grounding both of us. Melissa leaned back. "Look, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying kids need stability. 2 parents. Someone who's always there." There it was, clean, clear, no rapping this time. My mother inhaled sharply. "Melissa," what she asked. "It's not controversial." Noah stopped eating. I didn't look at Melissa right away. I watched Noah set his fork down carefully, like he was afraid of making noise. "That's enough," I said. Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You don't get to frame my son's life as a deficiency," I said. "Calm, even," she scoffed. "I didn't say that. You implied it." My father leaned back in his chair. "Let's all calm down." I nodded. "I am calm." Melissa laughed. "You don't sound calm." I reached for my water and took a sip. "Cold, steady. Kids pick up on things," she continued, "even if we pretend they don't. It must be hard for him not having his father around." Noah's shoulders drew in. His breathing changed, shorter, shallower. That was the moment something shifted from awareness to decision. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt her next sentence. I simply reached down, grabbed my bag, and pulled out the folder. I set it on the table between us. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Melissa stared at it. "What's that?" "Context," I said. My mother looked confused. "Andrea," I opened the folder and slid the first page forward. then the second. Melissa's smile faded. "That's private," she said. "It's factual." My father leaned forward. "What are you doing?" "I'm responding," I said, "since we're evaluating stability." Melissa laughed nervously. "This is inappropriate." "So was your comment," I replied. She looked at the papers again. "You can't just, I said. And I am." Mark finally looked up from his plate. His eyes scanned the page. His jaw tightened. "Melissa," my mother whispered. "This is a misunderstanding," Melissa said quickly. "It's old." "It's current," I said. Mark didn't say anything. That told me enough. My father stood slightly. "Andrea, this has gone far enough." "I haven't gone anywhere," I said. "I'm sitting right here." Noah looked up at me then. His eyes searched my face. I met his gaze and nodded once. Not encouragement. Assurance. Melissa's voice dropped. "You're doing this because I hurt your feelings." I shook my head. "You did this because you spoke in front of him." She scoffed. "You're overreacting." "I've been underreacting for years," I said. The room went quiet in a different way now. Heavier, focused. I closed the folder halfway, leaving it visible. "I didn't bring this to embarrass you," I said. "I brought it because you seem very comfortable judging my life." Melissa crossed her arms. "So this is revenge now." I met her gaze. "This is a boundary." My father shook his head. "Family doesn't do this." "Family doesn't humiliate children," I replied. Noah shifted closer to me. His shoulder brushed my arm. I placed my hand on his back without looking down. Melissa opened her mouth to speak again. I didn't stop her. I just waited calm and still as the weight of what she'd said, and what she hadn't known, settled fully into the space she'd created. Melissa didn't back down. She never did when she thought she still had the room. She glanced from the folder to me, then let out a short laugh that sounded more annoyed than nervous. "You're really doing this," she said. Over one comment. I stayed seated. My hand rested flat on the table, fingers relaxed. It wasn't one comment. She waved her hand like she was brushing something off the counter. "You're acting like I called him a criminal." My mother's voice was tight. "Melissa, please." What Melissa said. "We're all adults here." Noah shifted in his chair. Not enough to stand. Enough to be noticed. His eyes were fixed on the edge of the table, like he'd decided it was safer than looking at anyone's face. Melissa saw it. She always noticed things when she wanted to use them. "See," she said, gesturing lightly toward him. "This is what I mean. He's so sensitive." My jaw tightened. I let it relax before speaking. "Don't," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't what?" "Don't talk about him like he's a case study." She scoffed. "I'm not. I'm talking about circumstances." Mark finally spoke, his voice low. "Melissa." She ignored him. "Kids are affected by their environment. That's not controversial. That's just reality." There it was again, that word. My father leaned forward. "Enough." Melissa exhaled sharply. "Why is everyone acting like I said something awful? I'm just being honest." "Honest." She turned slightly in her chair, angling herself toward Noah. Not fully, just enough to make sure he could hear. I mean, she said, her tone casual, almost conversational, maybe. If your son had a father, he wouldn't be this way. The words landed flat and heavy at the same time. Noah froze, not flinched, not startled. Froze. His hands stayed on either side of his plate, fingers spread like he'd forgotten what they were supposed to do next. His shoulders locked. His breathing stopped for a beat, then came back shallow and uneven. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother inhaled sharply. "Melissa!" "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," Melissa said quickly. But she was still smiling. "You know what I mean." I felt the heat rise behind my eyes and settle into something colder. Clearer. Noah pushed his plate away from him slowly. The porcelain scraped against the wood, louder than it should have in the sudden quiet. "I'm not hungry," he said. His voice was steady. That somehow made it worse. He wasn't crying. He wasn't arguing. He was doing what he always did when something hurt too much. He was removing himself. My father stood halfway up from his chair. That was out of line. Melissa rolled her eyes. "You're all being dramatic." I hadn't moved yet. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't said anything. That was the difference this time. I placed both hands flat on the table and leaned forward just enough to make eye contact with her. "You don't get to explain my son's existence," I said. She scoffed. I wasn't explaining him. I was explaining why things are harder. "For who?" I asked. She hesitated for half a second. "For kids like him." I nodded slowly. "Say that again?" She laughed nervously. You're twisting my words. No, I said. I'm asking you to hear them. My mother reached for Noah's arm. Sweetheart, he pulled back gently. It's okay. I turned to him. No, it's not. Melissa's smile faded just a little. See, sensitive. That word, again, like a diagnosis, like evidence. I stood up then, slowly, deliberately, not to tower over anyone, to change the dynamic. Noah stayed seated. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Steady, grounding. Apologize, I said. Melissa blinked. For what? For speaking about a child like he's broken. She laughed sharp and incredulous. You're unbelievable. Apologize, I repeated. My father rubbed his forehead. Andrea, let's all calm down. I looked at him. I'm calm. Melissa crossed her arms. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. That wasn't truth, I said. That was cruelty. She shook her head. You always do this. You make everything extreme. I reached down and picked up the folder again, tapping it lightly against the table once. Not to threaten, to punctuate. You've been very comfortable judging my stability, I said. My marriage, my job, my parenting. That's different, she snapped. How I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because I don't talk about your life, I continued. I don't dissect your choices. I don't explain your children in ways that make me feel superior. Mark looked at her then. Really looked. Melissa, he said quietly. She ignored him. You think bringing paperwork to dinner makes you right? I think calling a child a problem makes you wrong, I said. Noah finally looked up. His eyes met mine, unsure searching. I nodded once. You're not alone. Melissa followed the exchange and rolled her eyes. You're teaching him to be weak. That was it. Not the worst thing she'd said, the clearest. I picked up the folder fully this time and held it against my side. I'm teaching him that silence isn't strength. My father straightened. Andrea. I met his gaze. You let this happen. His mouth opened, closed. Melissa laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. So what? You're going to punish us. I shook my head. I'm done absorbing this. She stepped closer to the table. You think you're better than us? I didn't hesitate. I think I'm responsible. For what she snapped. For what he hears, I said, nodding toward Noah. And what he learns about himself. The room felt off balance now, like everyone could feel something had shifted, but didn't know where to stand. Noah stood up quietly and moved closer to me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His shoulder brushed my arm steady and intentional. Melissa watched that her expression changing from irritation to something else. Something less comfortable. You're making a scene, she said. I looked at her. You already did. My mother's eyes were wet. Melissa, you went too far. Melissa shook her head, backing away slightly. I was trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to be right. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, dense. The kind that doesn't fill itself with small talk. I didn't rush to break it. I just stood there, one hand on my son's shoulder. The folder under my arm, breathing steady, as the weight of what she'd said settled exactly where it belonged. Not on him, not on me, on the person who chose to say it. I didn't raise the folder. I didn't slide it across the table dramatically. I simply opened it and laid the first page flat, smoothing the corner with my thumb. The way I do when I want something to stay exactly where I put it. Melissa stared at it. What is that supposed to prove? It's not proof, I said. It's information. My father stepped closer, squinting at the page. Andrea, this isn't the time. I didn't look at him. It became the time when she spoke to my son like that. Melissa laughed short and sharp. You think paperwork scares me? I think reality should, I replied. Mark leaned forward, eyes scanning the document. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. That was enough. My mother's voice wavered. What am I looking at? A notice, I said, from the lender. Melissa's smile flickered. That's old. It's not, I said. It's current. She shook her head. You don't know what you're talking about. I turned the page and placed the next one beside it. Payment history, dates, amounts. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said. Mark swallowed hard. Andrea! Melissa shot him a look. Don't. He didn't meet her eyes. That told the story before any of the numbers did. My father straightened. Why would you bring this here? Because we're already discussing stability, I said. I thought context would help. Melissa crossed her arms. This is a misunderstanding. Then explain it, I said calmly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted to Mark. He stayed quiet. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. Melissa, she waved her off. It's temporary. Most things are, I said. Mark exhaled. I lost my job 6 months ago. The room shifted. My mother gasped. My father stared at him. You said it was fine, Melissa snapped. I said I'd fix it, he replied. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. My father looked at me. How do you know all this? Because I'm listed as secondary, I said, on the loan. Melissa's head snapped toward me. What? I co-signed, I said, last year, when you refinanced. Her face drained of color. You're lying. I looked at Mark. Am I? He shook his head. No. My mother sank into her chair. Why would you do that? Because you asked me to, I said, turning to Melissa. You were worried about approval. That was a backup, she said quickly, just in case. It was the only way it went through, I replied. The table went quiet in a different way now. Not shocked. Exposed. My father rubbed his temples. So you've been helping them? Yes. For how long, my mother asked. Long enough to know this wasn't a fluke, I said. Melissa laughed, but there was panic in it. So this is what this is about. You want to embarrass me. No, I said. I want you to stop. Stop what? Stop using my life as a cautionary tale, I said, while assuming no one would ever question yours. Mark stared at the papers again. She's been covering the shortfall, he said quietly. That's why we're not in default. My father looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Is that true? Yes. Melissa stood abruptly. You didn't even tell us. I didn't want the leverage, I said. I wanted your kids to keep their house. That landed harder than anything else. My mother's eyes filled. Andrea! I held up a hand. I didn't bring this up to be thanked. Melissa paced. So what now? You're going to hold this over our heads. No, I said. I'm stepping back. She froze. What does that mean? It means I'm not absorbing disrespect in exchange for silence anymore, I said. My father frowned. Family helps family. Yes, I said. And family doesn't humiliate children. Melissa turned on me. You think helping us gives you the right to judge? I'm not judging, I said. I'm correcting the narrative. She scoffed. You act like you're some kind of hero. I acted like family, I replied, quietly. Mark leaned forward. Andrea, why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want Noah thinking money equals worth, I said. Melissa laughed bitterly. So noble. It wasn't noble, I said. It was practical. My father exhaled sharply. This dinner is over. I stayed seated. I'm not finished. Melissa stared at me, anger giving way to something else. Fear, maybe. Or the discomfort of realizing the dynamic she relied on wasn't holding. You're doing this because of one comment she said. No, I said. I'm doing this because you said it in front of him. Noah stood beside me now. He hadn't said a word. His presence was enough. His shoulder pressed lightly against my arm, steady. My mother whispered, Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. He nodded politely. It's okay. I looked at Melissa. He learned that from me. She flinched. Mark rubbed his face. What happens now? I didn't rush the answer. The last payment I made is being reversed. Melissa's eyes widened. You can't. I can, I said. And I did. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is vindictive. This is a boundary, I replied. For whom, he demanded. For the child who just learned his worth isn't up for debate, I said. Melissa shook her head. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm letting you handle your own life. Mark's voice dropped. How much time do we have? 45 days, I said. Less if nothing changes. The room felt unbalanced now, like everyone was standing on uneven ground. Melissa looked at me, eyes glossy. You could fix this. I could, I said. And I won't. My mother stood reaching for my arm. I stepped back gently. I won't teach him that cruelty gets rewarded, I said. Noah's hand found mine. He squeezed once, not tight, certain. Melissa sank back into her chair, staring at the papers like they'd rearranged something permanent. I gathered the folder and tucked it back into my bag. Not as a victory, as a conclusion to something that had been quietly running far too long. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain myself again. I just stood there, steady, while the assumptions that had filled that room for years finally ran out of space to hide. I picked up my keys without rushing. Not because I was calm enough to linger, but because moving too fast would have turned the moment into something louder than it needed to be. Noah stayed close to me, his shoulder brushing my side as we walked toward the door. No one tried to stop us. That silence said more than any argument could have. The porch light cast a dull yellow circle over the driveway. The night air felt cooler than I expected. Grounding. I unlocked the car and waited for Noah to get in before taking my seat behind the wheel. The door closed with a solid click, final without being dramatic. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't check it. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Not the heavy kind, just quiet. The road was familiar, the turns automatic. Noah stared out the window, not counting this time. "Mom," he said. "Yes." Was she right? I kept my eyes on the road. About what? About me. "No." He nodded, absorbing it. "Okay." That was it. No follow-up, no spiral, just acceptance. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to. At a red light, he shifted in his seat. "You didn't yell." "I didn't need to. That's not how it happens in movies. Real life isn't written by people who clean up afterward," I said. He smiled slightly, then looked back out the window. When we got home, the apartment felt smaller than usual. Not cramped. Intimate. Ours. Noah dropped his shoes by the door and headed straight for the kitchen. "Can we do pizza?" he asked. "Yes." He set the table without being asked. 2 plates, 2 napkins. He paused, then reached for a third napkin out of habit before putting it back. I noticed. I didn't comment. While we waited for delivery, he sat at the table and started talking about school. A project he was excited about. A kid who sat next to him in math. Normal things. The way he talked when he felt safe. The pizza arrived. We ate with our hands, grease on napkins, the TV on low in the background. Halfway through his second slice, he said, "She shouldn't have said that." "No," I said. "She shouldn't have." I didn't believe her. I looked at him. I know. He nodded satisfied and kept eating. Later, we sat on the couch and watched a movie we'd both seen before. He leaned against me, head resting on my shoulder. Familiar weight. Steady. My phone buzzed again. I silenced it without looking. Noah glanced at it, then back at the screen. "Is that Grandma?" "Probably." "Are you going to call her back?" "Not tonight." He considered that. Okay. When the movie ended, he stretched and yawned. That was good. It always is. He headed to bed without being reminded. I followed a few minutes later, standing in the doorway while he settled under the covers. "Mom," he said, eyes already heavy. "Yes. You stood up for us." The word "us" landed softly exactly where it belonged. "Always," I said. After he fell asleep, I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the counter, threw away the empty pizza box. Normal tasks. Necessary ones. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked it up. Messages stacked on the screen. My mother, my father, Melissa. Apologies tangled with defensiveness. Explanations mixed with warnings. I didn't read them closely. I didn't need to. I set the phone face down on the counter. In the bathroom, I brushed my teeth and studied my reflection. Same face. Same tired eyes. But something behind them had shifted. Not hardened, clarified. In bed, I lay on my back and listened to the building settle. Pipes ticking, distant footsteps, a neighbor's TV through the wall. The usual sounds, comforting in their predictability. I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, nodding politely. All the comments I'd let slide, because correcting them felt like more work than they were worth. I thought about the folded paper in the trash, about the way Noah lined up his food when he was anxious, about how much he'd been carrying quietly. I realized something uncomfortable and necessary. I hadn't been protecting him by staying quiet. I'd been teaching him how to disappear. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5:10 a.m. I shut it off before it buzzed twice. The apartment was quiet. Noah slept down the hall, his door cracked open the way he liked it. I moved through my routine with the same precision as always. Shower, coffee, uniform pressed the night before, lunch packed. At the kitchen table, I left a note by Noah's cereal bowl. "Proud of you, always." By the time he woke up, I was at the door. He padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up, eyes still heavy with sleep. "You're leaving?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'll be back tonight." He nodded, then paused. "We don't have to go there anymore, right?" I met his eyes. "We don't have to go anywhere. We're not respected." He smiled, just a little. "Good." At the bus stop, he waved the same way he always did. The bus pulled away. I watched until it disappeared around the corner, then turned back toward my car. At work, the day unfolded the way it always did. Meetings, decisions, emails that required precision and patience. I handled them all with the same steady focus, but something felt lighter, not easier, clearer. At lunch, I checked my phone again. One new message from my mother. "I'm thinking about what you said." I didn't respond. That evening when I got home, Noah was already there. Homework spread across the table, focused and steady. He looked up when I came in. "How was work?" he asked. "Busy," I said. "Necessary busy." He grinned. "That's your word." He was right. We worked through his math problems together, arguing lightly over the best way to solve one. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "Mom," he said. "Yes. I don't think I'm broken." I smiled. "You never were." He nodded like that settled it and went to wash his hands for dinner. I stayed at the table a moment longer, listening to the water run, feeling the quiet of the apartment settle into something solid. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like more than enough. If stories like this resonate with you, real family drama, quiet revenge, and hard choices that feel true, consider subscribing to the channel. More family revenge stories like this are coming. 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 Stories like this are coming.